Well, welcome back to Honest About the Irish, brought to you by yours truly, B-Man is Mad. No, I'm not mad today. I'm a lot calmer than I was last week after that terrible Toledo game. Notre Dame was victorious over Purdue this past Saturday. Beautiful day. Notre Dame improves to 3-0 with a 27-13 win over the Purdue Boilermakers. Now, the big story of the game going into the game was Purdue's stupid traditional drum that they always carry to every football game. And Notre Dame stiffed them and said, you can't bring it to the stadium because it won't fit in the visitor tunnel. The visitor tunnel is very small. You know, I love college football, but of course people went after Notre Dame for that, criticized Notre Dame for that. But you know what? I love it because it's college football and it's about rivalries. And listen, Purdue, tough crap. You know, you weren't on your turf, you were on the road. You got to bring the drum and keep it in the parking lot. So it wasn't even that big of a deal. But since they're trying to cancel Notre Dame's nickname and other crap, you know, this just adds fuel to the fire to hate Notre Dame even more. So I'll get into that later on today's show. But, you know, normally I start off very negative and I always nitpick because I'm a pessimistic and that's how I am as a fan. But let's go over the positive, what I liked. What I liked in the first half. Let's start it off. Of course, Notre Dame won 27-13 over the Purdue drumless Boilermakers. 27-13. Notre Dame's defense in that first half was the factor of that game, only allowing 89 yards and 3 points. Notre Dame's rush defense against the run and pressuring their quarterback Plummer looked much better than the first two games against Florida State and Toledo. They seemed to get to the behind the offensive line much quicker and causing Plummer to throw incomplete passes and look uncomfortable. They contained the line of scrimmage in the game during the first half. So I was really impressed with that. That saved them the game because Purdue made adjustments in the second half, made it a little tight up until that 50-yard run by Kyren Williams, which blew the game open a little bit and made Notre Dame in the comfortable lead, or put Notre Dame, I should say, in that comfortable lead. So those are some of the positive things. Kyren Williams, talking about him, he had that big 51-yard run. He also had that great catch in the first half for the touchdown for 43 yards. You know, he had over 120 all-purpose yards. He had 2 receptions for 47 yards, and he also had 12 carries for 91 yards and a touchdown. So he had 2 touchdowns total, and he's a key player. Now, if Notre Dame had a better offensive line, I think he'd be much better like he was last year. He seemed to be getting past the offensive line much quicker than the last 2 games. He didn't look like he was in slow motion. He had that burst of speed, so that's good. Things are picking up with him. Also, I really liked the passing by Jack Coan, even though he looked a little inconsistent. He looked, his accuracy was a little down. He seems he's getting a little more comfortable, and we will criticize him a little bit for him staying in the pocket too long, but he's making some bigger chances here, bigger throws, taking chances, going over the middle, going into traffic. You know, there was a couple catches there in the first half that Notre Dame could have caught, but they didn't. That's just the way it is. I felt in the first half that Notre Dame could have been up by 3 scores. This game should have been a blowout. They should have won this game by at least 3 or 4 scores, but they didn't. But that's why they blew these opportunities. It's been a common problem with Brian Kelly teams, even though when they've been productive and they've been good, they don't seem to blow a game wide open. It seems to be tight, and then eventually they get comfortable and they win the game by a comfortable margin. But I'd like to see Notre Dame, I know there's a couple teams they've beaten there pretty good, over the years, but I'd like to see a more consistent level of Notre Dame getting a big lead when they're expected to win and not look back, like Florida State game when they blew that 18-point lead, not something like that, but just be up comfortable and win the game by 3 or 4 touchdowns. That would be nice. Now let's go over some of the negative things about the game I didn't like, and of course let's start with the offensive line. And that is that the offensive line allowed another 4 more sacks. That's over 9 sacks they allowed combined in 2 games. That's something that Jack Coan's going to get hurt. That is a criticism all year that I've had so far in the 3 games. You cannot allow over 9 sacks in the the last 2 games combined. And another thing, Jack Cohen, when he gets in the pocket there, when he got sacked 4 times, it just looked like he sits there and he looks confused. His mental clock isn't on par. He needs to know when to release that ball or throw it out of bounds or do something. He doesn't have the speed or athleticism as Tyler Buckner does. But still, he just looks like his mental awareness is a little behind, and he needs to get rhythm. He needs to pick up with the speed, because these next 4 games are coming. They're going to be much quicker to the quarterback and get past that offensive line. Better defenses like Wisconsin and Virginia Tech. So he'll have to work on that. That's a concern I have, because if you're a quarterback, you have to know when to throw that ball out. That's why Tom Brady's so great. That's why I hate to give him credit, because you all know how I feel about Tom Brady, but he gets rid of that ball so quickly because of his clock in the head. Tells him Peyton Manning was the same way. Great quarterbacks always have that good mental clock. Now, I'm not trying to compare Jack Cohen to Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. That's a tall task. But I'm just telling you, they had a great mental awareness, know when to get rid of that ball, and Jack Cohen needs to work on that, because he'll get himself hurt. But also, that could be a factor of a poor offensive line. If I guarantee, if Jack Cohen was part of this team last year and had the offensive line last year, he would probably be more productive. And, it was a little bit of inaccurate throwing, even though I give him praise that he's been a little more gutsy throwing the ball over the middle in the traffic. There was a couple throws there, that the one over the receivers, over Avery Davis. There was a throw there late in the second quarter to Austin Jr. that Austin Jr. would have caught for a touchdown, but the ball was about 2 yards ahead of him into the end zone. Like I said, Notre Dame could have been up by a few more touchdowns at halftime. And lastly, the criticism of the game, and that's something I like to see more, is Michael Mayer seems like he was non-existent. I believe he was only targeted 3 or 4 times, only had one reception for 5 yards. I like to see him into the mix more. You got Avery Davis, who had who had a good game, 120 yards on 5 receptions. You have Kyron Williams, who came out of the backfield and was productive and had that huge touchdown in that first half. But I'd like to see Michael Mayer, mixed in a little bit there, because you have Austin Jr. as well, who I think is going to be a good receiver. And you have a lot of talent there that Jack Cohen, when he has enough time to throw that ball out, and the offensive line, when eventually they give him more time, hopefully, this will be a star-studded receiver crew, and they'll be able to make some plays. So, one thing I'd like to see, like I said, Michael Mayer be more productive and get some more catches, because he's going to be a star at the next level as well. So that's something I'd like to see get worked on and get better towards. And lastly, let's go over the next 4 games. This is the meat and potatoes of Notre Dame's season. I believe that this will define their season. Of course, this weekend in Chicago at Soldier Field, which was supposed to be last year, at Lambeau Field, but of course that was canceled because of COVID-19. That was wiped out. But Notre Dame does play Wisconsin, a top 25 team. Wisconsin's always had great offensive line, so they play them this Saturday at Soldier Field. That game is on at noon Eastern on Fox, by the way, in case you didn't know. I kind of hope that Gus Johnson is not doing that game. I'm pretty sure he is. He's very annoying, so maybe I'll have to put the Notre Dame radio broadcast on my stereo next to the TV, so I don't have to hear him. Also Joel Platt, or Klatt, whatever his name is. I think I said his name right. Those two, I don't know. They not a good announcer crew. And by the way, I kind of like Drew Brees with Mike Tirico. I've been very critical of Mike Tirico in the past, but I like Drew Brees because Drew Brees watches a game. He lets the game unfold. He lets everything unfold before him. Then he gives his opinion. He doesn't continue to talk during plays. He's going to be good. Drew Brees, I like him as an analyst. So that's something to look forward to. Much better than Doug Flutie. Like anybody, I could do a better job than Doug Flutie. Yeah. So I'm really praising, Drew Brees for being a great analyst so far, and he seems a little nervous, but he'll get better. Time with practice, he'll be a star. So I just wanted to give my opinion about that. But then after the Wisconsin game, then after this weekend, then the big game, the biggest game of their year, Cincinnati's big game too. Top 10 team, Cincinnati. They've been a good team the last couple of years. They were undefeated last year. That's going to be the toughest team on Notre Dame's schedule, probably next to Wisconsin. And Notre Dame's lucky to have them at home, so that will be a test for both for both Cincinnati and Notre Dame. Brian Kelly's former team from back in the day when he was the head coach there, and of course Notre Dame's defensive coordinator Marcus Freeman. So that will be something to look forward to, something to watch, and then that's going to be the big highlight of the season. So if Notre Dame And then they go home against USC the following weekend after Cincinnati. I believe there was a bye week in between Cincinnati and USC. Now, speaking of bye weeks, Cincinnati, Wisconsin, and I believe North Carolina all have a week to prepare against Notre Dame. The weeks before those games, like this week, Cincinnati is off. They all have a week to prepare against Notre Dame, so that's a factor that Notre Dame will have to be ready for, because when you have an extra week of practice, film, and studying, that's a benefit to the opponent. So, of course, USC at home, and then after that, they play at home against North Carolina. So those 4 games are going to be brutal for Notre Dame. That will define their season. I'm not going to sit here. I said last week they're going to go like 0-4 or 1-3. I'm thinking, if I don't want to be too positive or be too negative, but I got to be honest because that's my show. If they can, go 2-2, go 500, that's good enough. 2 losses. I don't expect them to win every game this year, every regular season game this year like they did last year. There's going to be a couple hiccups there. I mean, they could be 1-2 right now, actually, believe it or not. So, I expect them to lose a couple games out of these next 4 games. I'm not going to say who. I wouldn't be surprised if they lost to Wisconsin or Cincinnati or USC or North Carolina. Yes, even though USC has, fired their coach and they're looking for a new one and there's some, some turmoil there. But you know what? USC looked really good against Washington State Saturday night. So, I don't, USC is a rivalry game, so you got to watch out for that. So, we'll have to see the next 4 games. If Notre Dame goes 0-4 in that 4-game span, and then we wake up and they're, they're 3-4 at one point, then we know it's going to be a long season. It's been a long season. It's going to be a tough season. It's rebuilding year, blah, 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 all that, not to make excuses. But we will have to see how that plays out. And hopefully Notre Dame is competitive against the top 10 Cincinnati team. But it doesn't matter, because if Notre Dame does beat Cincinnati, I already know what the negative naysayers are going to say. Well, Cincinnati's really not that good on the road. They can't beat a power, football program. They can't beat a Power 5 conference team. That's why they never make it to the playoffs or go to a big bowl game, blah, blah, blah. That's what it'll be. Now, if they beat Notre Dame, it'll be, well, Notre Dame sucks, which, they kind of will this year. I expect them to lose a couple games. They won't be as good as last year, but they'll downplay Notre Dame no matter what. Okay. So I'm ready for that and how the national media is. So, we'll just have to see in those next 4 games, starting with Wisconsin this weekend at 12 noon on Fox, how that goes. So, and let's get into the final part of the show, and let's talk about Purdue's stupid drum. So Notre Dame renovated their stadium. 4 years ago, the project took a little longer than that, maybe 6 years ago. The project took 3 years. They made a visitors tunnel. And then, of course, they have the traditional big Notre Dame tunnel that came out. And the sun is gleaming on the Golden Domes and the big Notre Dame stadium. But they made the visitor tunnel very small and made it uncomfortable as much as you can to try to intimidate the Notre Dame's opponent, which is normal for a college football team. That's why you love college football. Shit, even Iowa, the Iowa Hawkeyes have a pink locker room to give to intimidate and give the opponent's team a foul mood and make them think about the locker room before they go into the game. Like, oh, this is ugly, to mess with their head. That's what Notre Dame does with their opponents, and that's what college football is. You want to win. But with Purdue and their little circus drum and their little drum, boom, 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 the drum doesn't beat to me or Notre Dame or to my show. But Purdue was upset that Notre Dame banned the drum because it wouldn't fit through the visitors tunnel. Now, last time I checked, I believe Purdue is an engineering school, and maybe they should have just helicoptered the drum in or asked Notre Dame to bring it in through the big tunnel. But you know what? Notre Dame banned it, and that's great. And I love it. It's college football. It's rivalry. And that's what makes college football beautiful. And I was continuing to say on Facebook, screw the drum, screw Purdue. And this was a big deal. People made a big deal about it. People were complaining about it. Some people were even criticizing Notre Dame for it, being, you're too petty. You know what? Listen, folks, this is the only reason because it's Notre Dame. Notre Dame is in the national spotlight. Notre Dame has been in the cancel culture about their leprechaun and, offensive to appropriate, cultural appropriation and all that bull crap and all that nonsense. So, of course, they're going to want to pick on Notre Dame for not allowing Purdue to bring the drum. I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was great. Screw the drum. That's what I've been saying. Screw you, Purdue. Notre Dame beat you. Okay, be more concerned about your football program and losing 27-13 to Notre Dame. And that's all I have to say, folks. That is it for today's episode of Honest About the Irish. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Make sure you hit that like button or hit the dislike button, leave a comment, share, subscribe if you're new, and I will talk to you later next week and have my reaction to the Notre Dame Wisconsin game at Soldier Field. Take care, everybody, and go Irish.